Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating academic study about a crazy moment in history when human rights activists and democratic progressives literally cheered for military tanks. I know, it sounds completely impossible, right? But what actually happens when the very people who champion freedom and the rule of law decide that the absolute only way to save democracy is to temporarily destroy it? So let's dive straight into this profound contradiction. Can a liberal support a military coup? I mean, why would individuals who dedicate their whole lives to protecting the Constitution suddenly condone an illegal military takeover to oust an elected leader? It kind of challenges everything we think we know about political ideologies. Section 1. The Liberal Paradox. To solve this mystery, returning to a detailed case study that explores the intense psychological and ideological friction of a nation caught in a massive crisis. And that brings us to our source material for today. We're looking at a paper published in the Journal of Political Ideologies by Michael K. Connors. He does this brilliant forensic examination of the 2006 Thai military coup, and specifically the fascinating liberal defection that accompanied it. Through interviews and a lot of historical analysis, Connors tries to make sense of what looks, on paper anyway, like total hypocrisy. Section 2. Thailand's existential crisis. To really understand this paradox, we can't just judge it from the outside. We have to look at the boiling point that actually created it. All right, let's look at the timeline. The 1990s brought massive hope to Thailand. Getting the 1997 People's Constitution established was this huge liberal victory, completely designed to end their cycle of military interventions. But, well, that dream rapidly collided with the polarizing rise of telecom billionaire Thaksin Shinawatra. He won these massive electoral victories in 2001 and 2005. By early 2006, though, the country was just paralyzed by street protests and boycotted elections, which ultimately culminated in a dramatic military intervention in September. Now, Thaksin's time in office was incredibly polarized. On one hand, you have Thaksin the populist. He delivered universal health care and won unprecedented majorities. Like, he had undeniable electoral support for sure. But on the flip side, you have Thaksin the authoritarian. His critics fiercely opposed him, accusing him of human rights abuses, cronyism, and actively subverting the very checks and balances that were established back in 1997. So, by late 2006, the nation had reached an absolute existential standstill. The constitutional framework had completely failed to resolve this intense friend versus enemy division. The normal rules of the game just weren't working anymore, and the country was at a total deadlock. Section 3. The Logic of Decisionism. So what actually happens when a political system completely breaks down like this? Let's introduce the core theory our source uses to explain the paradox. The absolute crucial point here is this concept of decisionism. It's a political theory rooted in the work of Carl Schmitt. Decisionism basically argues that during extreme emergencies, when society is literally teetering on the brink of collapse, the normal rules are just suspended. A decisive extraconstitutional action has to be taken to reconstitute order. It's essentially like hitting a giant emergency reset button when the whole system crashes. Sovereign is he who decides on the exception. This famous quote by Schmitt perfectly captures what the author calls the logic of liberal security. It represents this terrifying calculation for anyone who believes in democracy, the realization that liberals might willingly sacrifice democratic processes, literally submitting to a dictator or a military tank, just to save the underlying ideals of a liberal society from someone they perceive as a tyrant. Section 4. Historical Thai liberalism. But why were Thai progressives and liberals particularly primed to just accept the tanks? Well, Thai liberalism has some really unique historical roots, heavily influenced by two main concepts. First, there's delayed liberalism. This was a Cold War doctrine that basically said order and a strong middle class have to be established before true freedom can be granted. Second, there's royal liberalism, which is the reliance on a super-political guardian to step in and regulate messy, mundane politics during a crisis. Both of these concepts really normalize the idea of having a reserve power to step in and guide democracy. To put that into perspective, Thailand has experienced a lot of successful coups since the 1950s. This created an environment of what scholars call permanent constitutionalism. Because constitutions were rewritten so frequently, seeing a paper constitution felled by a military tank wasn't viewed as this ultimate world-ending tragedy. It was actually seen as an expected, almost routine reset. Section 5. Rationalizing the coup. Now, let's get inside the minds of the people involved.
How on earth did human rights activists and intellectuals justify supporting military force to themselves and to the rest of the world?
We're going to put their rationales under the magnifying glass using this fascinating concept called rhetorical redescription. It's basically how humans reframe a deeply uncomfortable reality so they can live with it, changing the narrative to protect their core identity.
The author identifies 3 distinct rhetorical moves Thai liberals used to redescribe the coup: equivalence, diminishment, and pragmatism. Let's walk through each one. The first move is equivalence. Here, liberals claimed that the 1997 Constitution was effectively already dead due to Thaksin's abuses of power. The logic is kind of wild. If the Constitution is already dead, then the military isn't destroying democracy, they're just returning fire in a normless void. So they framed the military action not as a coup, but as a completely necessary counter-coup. You can hear exactly that sentiment in this quote from a prominent human rights figure. They said, the real Constitution couldn't be used with the government. The real Constitution had already been torn up by Thaksin, so there was in reality no Constitution. It's the ultimate equivalence argument, right? You literally cannot overthrow a Constitution that, in your mind, doesn't even exist anymore. Moving to the second rationalization, diminishment. Take a look at this quote from a major Thai intellectual. Those who say that the coup was attacking democracy, they are superficial. It is a mass that is very ignorant of its own potential. This shows how some elites diminish the value of electoral majorities. They claimed that true, participatory democracy completely transcends just checking a box on a ballot, especially if they believe the voting mass is ignorant.
And finally, the third move, pragmatism. A significant intellectual stated, the coup was neither progress or regression, but problem-solving. I look at the coup d'etat as the only means that I can see at that time that can lead to structural reform. Many liberals just accepted the reality of the coup as a necessary practical breakthrough. They view the tanks as the absolute only viable tool left to clear the board and allow for future reforms. Section 6, the price of security. But, as the source material makes incredibly clear, this logic of liberal security comes with a really heavy toll. Yielding to that decisionist impulse absolutely did not secure liberal ideals in Thailand. Instead, it kind of opened a Pandora's box. It led to the emergence of a new entrenched conservative security state, repeated states of exception, including another military coup in 2014, and the implementation of the highly authoritarian 2017 constitution. By surrendering to force, the actual space for deliberative democratic solutions shrank dramatically over the following decade. So, when democracy and liberal ideals collide, is the logic of liberal security ever worth the cost of authoritarianism? We'll leave you with this final provocative thought. While we've explored the specific Thai context today, this explainer forces all of us to ask a universal question. What truly happens when those who champion freedom decide to rely on extra-constitutional force to save it? Are the ideals preserved, or are they lost the very moment the tanks roll in?